Good afternoon, everyone. Just quickly, I'll give you a brief rundown or brief history for this project. And in 2000, the tree itself, in 2006, my client, who is the Barcaldine Regional Council out in central Western Queensland, which is a state in Australia, rang me and said, Brian, unfortunately someone has poisoned our nationally heritage listed Tree of Knowledge. Now, the Tree of Knowledge was the tree where 13 striking shearers met under in 1891, and that the strikes of the shearers, they were fighting for better wages. And so those shearers were actually imprisoned for 2 years, and from that, the core body of those striking shearers actually was the formation of the Australian Labor Movement, and then followed on for the Australian Labor Party. So just quickly, so in terms of this is one of 72 nationally heritage listed sites. So it does have a very cultural and social significance in terms of Australian history. There is a political attachment to the actual project itself, but I was very apolitical, and so we treated it in terms of that. So one of the initial ideas for the project was, and I won't sort of read through this fully, but the idea of the project were that we were generated by observations in the way human beings create and relive memories. And the outcome from this observation is not a traditional building, but an interactive place that allows us to remember the tree and the space around it. As a new experience in its own right, the memorial also has the capacity to create new memories for its visitors. So I'll just sort of take you through the processes in terms of the architecture and how we generated the actual memorial itself over the top of the dead tree and the actual process itself. So as you can see, this little diagram sort of is the core or literally explaining the ideas behind it. So what we were left with after the tree was poisoned was the relic itself. And then we've got some photos in terms of the late 1890s when the tree was in its full maturity, and we were able to extrapolate from photographs a volume of that tree. And then we had the memory or the memorial itself created by a negative void around the relic itself. So that gives you a general background in terms of a design philosophy. So this is just really some photos of when we actually removed the tree. And quite a funny anecdote of this story is I had the client ring me up one day and said, oh Brian, we're going to cut the tree down this afternoon. And unbeknownst to me, I said, hang on, what about the root ball? The root ball is the symbolic of the tree's initial sort of birth. And so they said, oh, there's no root ball there. And I said, well, can you get a couple of guys to go down there? And anyway, they started digging and digging and digging, and this root ball was actually quite massive. So we made a decision to actually cut the root ball sort of a 6 metre sort of base around it, and we were actually able to extract primarily the body of the tree itself. We actually dismembered the old tree, all the limbs, and we actually had them taken away as well. So the tree itself was taken to Brisbane, which was 1,200 kilometres away, and it was preserved in boron salts over a period of 6 to 8 months. So this is it going into its bath and being treated. It had just a dripper system over it, as you can see, and they're all the branches that we had actually taken off the relic as well. So now here's this moment captured in time at around 1890. So this is about the time that the shearers striked around the base of this tree and actually met there and formulated what they were going to do to try and get their better wages from the graziers. And so here's another photo of the tree looking down the avenue of the street. And in fact, when you go there today, that town still has that very similar feel to it. So it's actually quite wonderful in terms of its character through the old Western Queensland town. So as you can see, we're actually able to generate from that's not I don't know, the slide's sort of being it's a bit big, but we're able to actually generate the scale of the tree and try and form some volumetric sort of process in terms of generating a three-dimensional form. So these are some initial ideas in terms of what we thought the canopy was in terms of its scale and size. So that sort of generated the form of the memorial itself. And here we are, we're actually clumping each of these. The tree is actually an old ghost gum tree. I don't know whether anyone knows Australian eucalypts, but big old beautiful ghost gum So from this diagram we were able to generate both plan and sectional ideas. So this gives us an idea how we actually generated that 3D volume over the top of the memorial. Just quickly. And then the idea is that there was a great conundrum with this project, was how do you actually cover a tree? How do you put something over the top of the tree? So the idea of this creating this negative void, which is the original canopy, sort of came to us. So what we did was we actually suspended timbers from a structure, and that created that original canopy. So even though there was only the relic of the stump left with some regrowth branches, we were able to create the feeling of the tree by suspending 3,500 timbers. So the actual volume of the structure is actually 18 metres cubed. So it is actually quite sizable. So as you can see, this is how we actually generated the form of being in underneath this structure. And of course, it's not a static structure. The actual timbers do sway, and I've got a little movie which I'll show quickly to you afterwards. So this is just our early three-dimensional sort of imagery that we generated. The plan form itself, the heritage report called for a decluttering of the site. It was over time they'd built a lot of stuff near it, and so we literally tried to clear everything out of the way. They're just some elevational ideas. Now, this is 1/4 of our plan. Each suspended timber had a designated height and an orientation. We actually chamfered the end of the timbers to create a leaf-like, it was symbolic of the leaves. And we actually painted some of those in terms of different eucalypt colours as well of the actual tree. And so that was the contractor's diagram, and they used to ring me on a daily basis just doing their head in terms of hanging these things at a certain height, because there's 3,500 of them. So these are some cutting diagrams of the external timbers, and as you can see, there's a I don't know whether you can see there, but that's how we actually suspended the timber from the actual structure, the overhead structure. The other idea with the structure that we did is we've got a glass roof on the memorial, so you get this dappled light coming through the timbers itself, and because these timbers sway, you get this lovely sort of sensation of you actually being in under a tree. And because of the structure being so great in terms of the trusses, we actually clad the trusses in a mirrored stainless steel, so you don't actually read any of that structure as you look up through it, and so it has quite a lightweight element to it. So I'll just quickly take you through the photo. So this was a salvage. We actually salvaged the root ball and built a glass floor over it, and so people can look down. Another little funny story was when we were actually digging the tree out. The council workers found this little box of ashes with a plaque on it, and it actually had a gentleman's name, a true believer, so he was a very staunch Labor Party member, and his wife had snuck in there 15 years earlier one night and actually buried his ashes in there, so we actually replaced the plaque there in terms of the root ball, and she was a guest at the opening of the tree, of the memorial. So this is it in its context in terms of that streetscape that we were talking about. So from the outside, I'll just quickly read in terms of the actual structure. We actually charcoaled the timber on the outside, and there was this symbolic gesture in terms of creating a veil where it didn't give away too much of the memorial. So from the outside you get to read a little bit of that canopy, but it doesn't fully sort of expose itself until you actually walk in underneath the structure. So the scale of the structure and the form created by the hanging timbers is based directly on the extent of the tree's canopy as we went through. So in terms of the actual, the external timbers are charcoaled to create a veil around the memorial space. This finish and its form reference a place of memory and mourning. The veil provides hints to the form and movement inside, but it does not fully reveal the impact of this space. This experience is saved for the visitor as they enter the shade of the tree, and the technique personalises the experience for the visitor because it is something of a secret revealed. The veil and the glass roof also provide the very practical protection from long-term direct exposure to wind-driven rain and sun, which is required for the relic tree. Inside, the sculptural forms of the canopy Its stance created a vaulted effect appropriate for a place of memorial. For some, this spatial experience will also resonate as a form of veneration to the relic tree and the memory of the events associated with it. The Tree of Knowledge Memorial is constructive of over 4,913 individual timber members, comprising 3,500 for the suspended canopy and 1,500 for the external facade or veil. Okay, so this is actually now in underneath. So all of the timber is recycled with a chain of custody certification verified by an authorised third party. In fact, all the timber was actually sourced from old power poles. So, you know, that was one of our very, very strict guidelines in terms of sourcing the timber. The root ball was salvaged intact with the trunk and displayed through the glass floor. This design feature gives the unique and dramatic effect of suspending the viewer above the root ball whilst they are surrounded by the suspended timber above. The structure, including the suspended timbers, is rated to a 50-year maintenance-free period, effectively minimising long-term maintenance costs for the council and community. The design sets out to reinstate the amenity of the original tree and the spaces around it. With the ochre of the original soil reinstated, the public plaza, the extent of the original canopy redefined, a gentle movement once again visible overhead, the relic tree, and with shadows on the ground, the amenity of the original tree is remembered. This is once again a place where old stories can be told and past events remembered. It is also a place where new ones are created. So I'll just finish off here. These are actually the painted ends of the timber, so to create that actual leaf form. So we've actually got up lights which actually shine off the paint at night, and it is actually quite spectacular at night. And that's, I think, these are just some images. There's a railway line on the northern edge of that. So each, just to give you a guide, each one of those timbers is 6 foot or 1,800 by 125 square, so they're actually quite a sizable member. So the scale of the thing is actually quite hard in terms of the actual photographs. And that's it. And just quickly, I'm just going to play. Now, where was that? How do I do that? So as I said, it's not a static. So as the wind actually races through, and you don't need a lot of wind, you get 3,500 sticks of timber. That's just the wind. Yeah, they don't need to hear the wind. But the actual timbers clunk together and make this lovely sort of, there's a real melodic sort of, it's a really reflective place to be. And it's actually got this big, you know, you've got these big sticks of timber plunging together. So, and that's the end of it. So, thank you.